Good evening and welcome to the 13th LILA PRISM lecture this year. We are very happy that we have Pushpesh and Sohail with us today. This is a kind of very special evening for us because many people have asked me, like when we announced this lecture, like what is this food to do with your transformative governance? So I had some personal explanations given to people in 220, but I think this is an occasion where we can kind of reflect on this a bit before we start, as people are coming in. We thought, food is something which we cannot just escape at all. And governance is also something which we just cannot escape. This is something which is common. One thing is, like when we talk about food, I think we take food for granted because we think it happens all the time in our households. We not only take food for granted, we take the people who prepare food also for granted. Till the time food is not available, it is like, okay, everybody has food, it's a kind of thing. So that, I think the problem of governance starts there, from this taking for granted, this very, very crucial, essential space of food. So if you look at the traditions, whether it's culinary traditions, medical traditions, religious traditions, the food is an integral part of all these. But we don't really look at it that way. But if you bring other terms like public health or religion or cultural kind of entities, then immediately they become part of your governance consideration, governance thinking. So the question is like, how do you understand food and the way food is produced, consumed, conserved, all these kind of things involve people and certain types of practices which are integrally linked to cultural identities in a space like India. So, so we thought it very, very essential that we thought about this seriously in the context of governance, and that's how this came about. And both these people, most of you know them and how engaged they've been with food. One thing that interests us at LILA is, because we are a translocal foundation, translocal organization, translocal people interest us. So Pushpesh, as many of you know, his background is history and international relations. And suddenly there is this obsession called food, which normally you think that it's a hobby or it is something. But when you talk with him, you know that it is not really that. There is an integral kind of connection that he's trying to draw between this obsession, what he calls obsession, and his other pursuits. So establishing this connection is very integral to our pursuit at LILA, because LILA is play, and play is allowing us to actually be on the level ground to find horizontal connections among apparently disparate different areas. With these initial remarks, I would like to introduce, formally, though you know both of them, because it's an evening of a lecture. So I just read out a few essential things about both of them. Pushpesh Pant is a teacher, author, columnist, television anchor, broadcaster, and independent producer of television documentaries. He studied history and international relations and law. But his interests range from Ayurveda and related traditional knowledge systems, Himalayan folklore, IT-enabled gadgets, Hindustani music, etc. So you can see this. They are not really, when you talk to him, you know that they are not really separate things at all for him. In his head, in his self, in his pursuits, they are connected. So these connections are very important for us. And his obsession, Indian cuisines. He has also written books on diplomacy, travel, religion, and food. Thank you very much for being here. This is an absolute delight. And Sohail. heritage walks in Delhi. I'm sure some of you have been part of his heritage walks. And he writes about Delhi, its language, its food, its water bodies, and its monuments. He's actually a Delhi person. He really knows Delhi inside out. He also makes documentaries, writes and blogs on issues of culture, language, education, and communalism. He has worked with PTI TV, National Literacy Mission, Home TV, Big TV, Kingfisher.com, etc. He was director of LILA PRISM, a creative activity center for children, and currently works with Knowledge Infrastructure Systems Private Limited. He is founding trustee of Sahmat, which all of us know. Thank you very much, Sohail, for being here, and over to you.
Since the speaker of the evening says that I shouldn't stand up because that might force him to stand also. So I've known Pushpesh for years, decades. And when I first met him, he was my senior in the university. So in the tradition in which both of us have grown in different parts of this country, he was Pushpesh Bhai for us. So he has become Pushpesh only recently.
Since there have been other Bhais.
Yes, yes.
Very happy not to be called a Bhai.
Yes. And I, aside from loving food in whatever shape it comes, and with some interest in cooking, but I started looking at food more seriously when suddenly discourse began to develop in this country about what is Indian and what is not Indian. And that is when I started looking at the food that we eat. And some of what Rizio was saying is deeply connected to how have we acquired the kind of food that we eat and where did it come from. And if you were to remove everything that is not of Indian origin, what would you eat? And then I started looking at the myths of, which are now very current, that we have never attacked anybody because we are peaceful people. We are peaceful people because we are vegetarians, meat eaters are food. This is a discourse which is on the ground very, very effectively propagated on a daily basis. Nobody turns back to remind them that those who perpetrated the kind of genocide that happened in Gujarat were essentially vegetarians. So what you eat has nothing to do with how you're going to conduct yourself. So, but I started looking at that, and Pushpesh's investigation into food is on a different trajectory, and because he's author of several books on food, and he organizes, he's put together curated festivals of food and exploring the connection between our traditional medicines and food, and this entire thing of looking at what is Sattvic, and So it is a great honor for me to be here and to be chairing. This is probably the first time I'm chairing something, and chairing a session where Pushpesh is going to be speaking. So I'll give the floor to Pushpesh, and after his presentation, if there are questions, we will take them. And I am absolutely sure that we are going to be fascinated with the kind of connections that Pushpesh will make between food and governance and much else besides.
Thank you. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and to cut a long story short, I'm no less honored that Sohail is chairing this session, and I'm very grateful to Rizio for giving me this opportunity to indulge in what obsesses me most of the time. And I think I will not disappoint Sohail Bhai that my distractions are not totally unrelated to what agitates his mind at the moment. But where do I begin? I mean, I think I don't know why I get caught into these things where I end up, I like talking, I like the look of the audience in front of me and loyal friends turn up. But then I times ask, what's a good guy like me doing in this crowd of rowdies? No, this is a translocal, so I can probably come out a little transgenderish also. So the funny part is that the lecture is pretty heavy. It is transformational, transformative governance and food. Now, food, as he pointed out, and Rizio in her prefatory remarks said, is serious business. It involves survival of the individual, of the species, and so on. Without food, we can't even indulge in what is my other favorite topic, sex. So forget about that. so I had to bring that in. But the point is that food is central to life. But then what is transformative governance got to do with that? Does food transform governance, or does government of any sort transform food which we eat? So there is this chicken and egg kind of a situation which we shall leave for the time being and postpone it for a discussion a little later. But then food is central to existence not only because survival depends on it. I think all our social relations depend on, you did point out that we tend to neglect or overlook people who prepare food. We tend to neglect even more the people who produce food. So we forget about that, we take it for granted that food will be on our plate, which she said, but do all of us take food for granted? Not a person who's starving to death, not a person whose crop has failed. So I think there is this, probably a little caution has to be exercised before we generalize about food at all. Now, he did raise a very interesting point which I intend to come to a little later in the talk. What is Indian, and are we talking only about Indian food and Indian governance? Or are we talking in more general terms that there is transformative relationship between food and governance universally? And India is no exception. And what is India is a definitional point, the idea of India, and what is kosher and halal in India or not India here. So that I think the basic point which we must understand is that food is part of our identity. I mean, when we don't like the term identity politics, food is identity. Food defines whether I eat halal or jhatka. Food defines I am a vegetarian, a genocidal maniac vegetarian, or a Pacific carnivore. I have yet to come across a Pacific carnivore though in my experience, but I think the point is well taken. Not all vegetarians are sattvic, and I think he had a little touch of delusion when he said that Pushpesh is interested in sattvic food and tamasic food. I do not think that sattvic food is necessarily good. Is only a category of a particular kind of a food which is good for appropriate, not good for a particular kind of a physical type or a psychological orientation, but more about that later. There's a topic of a different talk. I think the basic thing about food is that food is part of our cultural inheritance. It defines who we are. You can change. You can maybe acquire a taste. You can give up what you are born with. But there is a DNA of taste, of flavor, of food in your makeup, and you do or do not do that. So production, distribution, consumption of food decide all social relationships, economic relationships, and a lot of politics. We come to that, and I think Rizio has done well to say that you can't escape either food or governance. So it is there, taken. So there is a relationship, and we will try to explore the relationship in the context of contemporary India. Rest of it is probably an abstraction. But where do I begin? And I think, it is going to be very, very personal. It is going to be a little rambling, haphazard. I was born in a small village-like town about 70 years ago in hills of Uttarakhand. They were hills of Uttar Pradesh then. The place was called Pushpesh. And I never had to grapple with this problem, what India was and how diverse it was. There was a small institute set up there, small when I was born. When it began, it was one of the most prestigious imperial institutes. It was called Imperial Veterinary Research Institute. And it was located in Mukdeshwar at an altitude of 8,000 feet because there was no refrigeration, and research in bacteria and virus and food and other kinds of diseases was easier there. It predated pasture institutes in Kasauli and elsewhere in Uti. So this institute was an all India institute. And people from all parts of India comprised the research staff. So there was Mr. Menon, who was a Malayali. There was Neelakantha, who was from Karnataka. There was Gajendra Singh, who was from Punjab. There was Nanak Chand, who was from Sindh. And there was Madhusudan Dutt, who was from West Bengal. And the names come easy to me because these were people who one grew up with their children and so on. And the food which was shared, there was an acceptance, an easy acceptance of diversity, that all this was a mini India very oddly staying in a place. I did not realize it then that how unique that place was and how exceptional the place was. We'll come to that in a minute, whether it was exceptional or not. There was not only this acceptance of diversity, there was acceptance of difference, that people ate differently than what we ate at home. And I must make another conflict of interest admission right here. Our household was very crazy. I mean, it runs in the family, sort of, this multiple personality disorders. My mother was born in Kathiawar, educated in Banaras and Shantiniketan. Her father was the only Hindu minister and a home minister at that in the Rampur Riyasat. He served in Junagadh also. He served in Orcha. So the food we cooked at home, and he died in Karnataka. So the food we cooked at home was sambar one day, kokamwali dal the other day, shami kebabs the third day, and things of that kind. And it came as a surprise to me in Delhi when I joined the School of International Studies. JNU was not in existence. And the menu was very eclectic. It was supposedly an all-India menu for an all-India institution, Indian School of International Studies. Everybody complained, how many days are we going to have sambar? Why must we eat this Madrasi food? And somebody from South would say, these North Indian barbarians, ek din to sambar khane de humko. I mean, why should they have this curry and rajma and chole and bhature every day? And I remember Javed said, Javed Alam, he would say, कम से कम गोश्त की 2 मोटी तो डाल दे, मैं हैदराबाद से आया हूँ, भूख के सारे रोटी खा लूँगा. Things of that kind. Then I realized that it was not normal for people to accept sambar as their food. So I think what he said is extremely thought-provoking, that how many of us treat the foods of India as heritage, our shared heritage, that a Madrasi, I mean Madrasi is a bad word, but then there was no linguistic states. I've talked to you of pre-1956 days in Pushpesh. Nehru hadn't made his major mistake of forming linguistic states. I still feel that had he divided the map of India along the zones of taste, it would have broadly corresponded to the present partition and division, but it would have been a far more sensible. People eating the same kind of food, speaking the same language, probably coincide or don't coincide. But I'm talking to you of the days when in IVRI, anybody from parts of Kerala, parts of Andhra, parts of Karnataka, and parts of present-day Tamil Nadu was a Madrasi. So the identification was that there is a Madrasi food, there is a Bengali food, and of course, what about the poor Bengali in Pushpesh? He didn't have much because there was no river in sight or even in distance, and fish doesn't travel very well in transportation. So the poor Bengali had to eat a non-Piscian food. So we realized that there was shukto, there was a ghanto, there was a charchadi, there was a kumla thing, and then you suddenly realized that there were bhajas of 5 varieties. There was a posta aloo bhaja, there was a begun bhaja, and so on. And then you made a subtle distinction that there was also this Mr. Chaudhary, who was an Ahamiya, who shared something in common with Bengali, but he didn't quite like that food. And much later I discovered that the poor chap was hanging on to his small supply of khar, because that is what distinguished his food from the Bengali food. I mean, the problem was that this is where I realized that, and the problem which Sohail was raising in the beginning, that what is Indian makes you think, take a double take and think twice. I belong to a particular part in India, I belong to a community, I speak a language, I have a religion, and my responses to everything around me is either Indian or alien, or what about the borderland, the fuzzy borderland? And Mukteshwar was very close. I don't know if anyone of you have gone to Mukteshwar near Nainital. You can see the snow-capped peaks in distance, not too distant, but Ji bilkul, Nanda Devi is 21 kilometers as the crow flies, Panchachuli is 23, and Trishul is 19 kilometers as the crow flies. So they are within striking distance. And Nepal is next door, and beyond Panchachuli is the Nepal Himalayas. And in this small place, which had a total population of 1200, 400 were Nepalese coolies. Coolies, proper coolies, I mean, beasts of burden. And they had a different food. And you realize that our food, where we came from, our village was across the Kali River. This side was Nepal and this side was India, was closer to their food. It was very different from the food of other research officers, research assistants. My parents were locals, they were local Uttarakhandis. And then, I mean, I still, if I go to Nagaland, I go to Northeast, I go to the Nepalese Tarai, I go to Nepalese mountains, I think this is our food. But does it make food of Kerala any less my food? Does it make Kashmiri food any less my food? Does it make, there was one Professor Bhatt also, who was raising merino sheep in Shama, Diti, and he was in Mukteshwar, he ended up as a director there. But he very tactfully avoided talking about Kashmiri food because it was Kashmiri Pandit food. and it was a minority within a minority within a minority. They hadn't been thrown out of the very as they, but that food was not talked about very much, and so on. But why I stay and harp on this is that there were other things in Mukteshwar which made me realize what food and relationship with governance and social relationships were there. I'm talking to you of 54, 55, 53, 54, 55. I was 8 or 9 years old. And I realized for the first time that the food was in short supply. Not in our house, but generally in short supply. There was rationing enforced. The rationing had been enforced during the war. It had continued after independence India. There were ration shops, and there were people who bought their grains at the ration shop, and there were people who brought their food from home because their villages were nearby, and there were people like us, I say it with a sense of shame, who could afford to buy what they wanted in open market. So you suddenly realize that there was a shortage in, I asked my mother one day, why did we go to the ration shop? She said, oh, the ration there is coarse grains, and we hardly ever use that. But then there was an issue. As a small child, I had to ask myself a question that people ate different things. And the people who worked at home, and especially these Nepalese coolies, they were very happy when they were fed at home and given a gehu ki roti. Because they normally had a gruel, a porridge, either of corn, or they had coarse millets like mandwe ki roti. So as one grew up then in Mukteshwar, one realized there are 3-4 things. There were shortages, there was rationing, people ate differently, and there was a relationship between the villages near the institute and the institute people proper, who is like a distinction between urban middle class and the poor folk who have come to live in the jhugis who eat differently. The other point which comes back to me was the seasonal availability of produce. Everybody, rich or poor, ate what was seasonally available, and you had to make do with that. So in winters you had aloo mooli ki sabzi, and then when winter was harsher you had mooli aloo ki sabzi, and then even aloo was in short supply. There was mooli ki sabzi and mooli ka pani, and there was a very strange sabzi called aloo ka thechwa. You had a potato with skins included. You mashed it in a grinding stone and put it with no masala, salt and pepper and little oil, and you had a thin. There was no choice. You were not poor, but there was no vegetable, there was no motor road, you could not have anything else. So either you had dried vegetables you had done in summer, and then at times people grumbled, why doesn't the government make a road up to this place, meaning a motor road? Why doesn't the government ensure that there is a supply of vegetables from the plains regularly to this place? So there was scarcity, there was seasonality, and there was social stratification. And there was also this sense of community that if anybody had some food which was not available in harsh winter, it was shared. I have some dried vegetables, I have some buddy, I have some body, I will share it with whoever is around. And people accepted this diversity and difference about food. There was a small Anglo-Indian Christian community in the institute, and they said, oh, Mrs. Chapman, Mr. March, they eat everything. Of course, beef was not mentioned, although corned beef in tins was available in the cooperative store, and there was no such overzealous Hindu aggression about Christians eating beef. I mean, the Muslims were very few. There was a small Muslim community, and there was only one butcher in town, and he was a Muslim butcher. He was called Ahmad, and nobody bothered that if they wanted to eat meat, nobody said that Ahmad jhatke ka meat bech raha ki nahi bech raha, because he would not, and everybody ate the halal ka meat and the questions were not asked. Things changed around 1960. For the first time, a sizable chunk of Punjabi refugees displaced from partition ended up in the institute in positions of lower research assistants, some students, and they started raising a question, why isn't there a jhatka meat shop here? I don't blame them. They had been scarred by partition. They had probably very gruesome memories, and that's the first time I realized that there are prohibitions and prescriptions about meat eating, or about eating at all. People said, "Hum to nahi khayenge iske yahan se meat leke." And some people took great pride. They brought stale meat with them, walking from Almora, which was 14 miles away, or coming from Nainital, 32 miles away. But I have not lost my religion. I have got a jhatka meat, and I will eat this jhatka meat. And then it was said, you know, fish though, it may be stinking, but I will consume it because Allah ke yahan se zibah ho gaya. So that is, you know, these are the memories which have colored my thinking about food ever since that day. That A, there is glorious diversity, there was an easy acceptance till one stage, and it's strange that as the memories of partition faded from 47, 48 to 58, 59, 60, this kind of an intolerance had seeped in. People were thinking that we eat differently and we don't accept what others eat very readily. And we don't take it for granted. I also think that this was about the time when we ceased to have a conscience about people who are less privileged than us, who don't have 2 square meals. And I think if you talk of food and the relationship with governance, another thing, thinking about the topic, I was very intrigued. What was the ruling prince in an Indian state called? My Baap Annadata. Annadata because it was supposed that through generation across millennia, it was the duty and the responsibility of the ruler, the state, to provide food for the subjects. It was both a duty and a responsibility, and a person who failed in doing that failed in his principal duty. So then, when a democratically elected government came after independence, why should it be referred to as a Mai Baap Sarkar? Because like parents are supposed to provide for the young child growing up, the government is supposed to provide for the subjects. So this relationship between governance and food, provision of food, food security, adequate food security is very interesting. I think is one of those essential things in contemporary India. And if we come to the globalization, we come to economic reforms, and we have a systematic destruction of public distribution system, and then the talk about crocodile tears and all about food security, the dichotomy of this strikes you in the head very, very strongly. Then, of course, I came to Delhi. I finished my MA in Nainital, came to Delhi. I was around 18. This was the year of 65. Jawaharlal Nehru University was not there. I came to Supply Halls. And I had my second experience of food and governance. Some of you who are older, some appear grey-haired here. This was the day of year 480, what has been described very brilliantly as the ship-to-mouth existence of the nation. It was pre-Green Revolution, and 65 was a bad year. People don't use that ugly word famine anymore. We say drought, we say shortages, we say funny extreme weather conditions, but nobody says famine is famine. And 1965, I think, you may correct me, was the last time when the Indians had the honesty to say that there was a famine in Bihar. The district was Palamu. People were selling their children. People were sating their hunger by eating bark of the trees. And again, the famous poet had done a photo reportage on it. It was put up in where the present day Palika Bazaar is there, theatre communication building, and people were contributing for the relief of that, not drought, but famine. And the shortages were so acute, we are totally dependent on PL 480 imports. And there was one cereal-less day in the city, even in the capital. There was a guest control order which said only 5 people could be fed in a particular party. So if you had a marriage party of say 40, 50, you had 5 neighbors putting in and legally saying that it is like drinking without a license. How many bottles can you store in your house? And then there was 5, not more than 5 dishes you could serve unless they were made with non-cereal like potatoes. But my personal experience of the shortage and the relationship with what government could enforce and to force you to eat was when I joined the hostel warden told me, where is your ration card? I must see to it that your ration card shows your name as scratched at the place of origin. So you are not drawing rations there. So then I will put your name on the hostel message register. I actually had to get it done. I had to get a copy of my ration card from home sent here, and then my name was added to the hostel message register. But there it is. It is not only shortages, it is not only what the government was forcing you to eat on a particular day or not eat on a particular day, or a guest control order, it was good for the people or not is besides the point. It probably was very good for the people there, right? More equitable distribution of available food. But then the interesting part was that I also discovered at the same time that Delhi was a place where plenty existed among poverty. You could go out still and eat what you wanted to eat if you had the money. And I remember, I don't mean splurging in Oberoi, Oberoi had just come up the year later, Ashoka was a couple of years old, and Akbar Hotel used to advertise as late as 1970. I remember that for 21 pieces of silver you can splurge like a prince. The buffet was 21 rupees, taxes included, tips included there. But I remember more interesting places. I remember a dhaba called Azad Dhaba in Shankar Market, where rotis were 25 paise, 20 paise, and dal came free. Can you imagine that? Where dal today costs 200 rupees a kilo, probably the rotis can come free if you offer to buy a half a katora full of dal. So it would be the other way around. But I remember eating to my heart's content, belly is full, for 70 paisa at Azad Dhaba. There. But the point is that there were lots of people who could walk out of their house. They may be, he did make a very interesting point about vegetarianism, and I think most Indians like are closet gays, we are closet non-vegetarians. At home we keep it well hidden, we eat meat, but the moment we get out and have a couple of drinks down our throat, then we can eat anything. We will not even bother about bada hai, chota hai, utha hai, baitha hai, kya hai, hum sab kha lenge. But the point is that I discovered in Delhi as a young man that there were shortages, there was food shortage, but for a rupee you could go out, eat at a dhaba and break all the food taboos. Nobody was watching. So the city gave you the opportunity to challenge food taboos and ate what you did. You also had places where if you had more money, you could indulge in exotica. You could go to Sohail, you could go to cellar, you could have a Mediterranean meal, you could have a potted beef. Nobody was bothered about that, what you were eating. But then this ended. I think the point which I wish to make is that freedom and food have two relationships. One is a freedom from hunger. You must get enough food to eat to sustain yourself and live your life with human dignity. And once you have the freedom from hunger, the other freedom is not less important, that you should be free to choose what you wish to eat when you want to eat. And nobody should tell you that if you are a Muslim, you must eat only halal. If you are a Hindu, you should avoid, not only avoid beef, you should go and kill somebody who eats beef. The long short point is this, that even if you suspect that somebody is having beef, he may not have had beef ever in his life, but you have the license to go and kill him. So I think that is the kind of thing which was not there in 1965. There was poverty, there was social inequity, there was, but there was a desire to rid the nation from the freedom, from the fear of hunger, and there was enough choice even for a person who had maybe a 1 rupee note in his pocket to eat what he wished to eat in the Fuji market, Bengali market, outer circle of So I think this relationship is something which we have lost, unfortunately, somewhere along the way. And I wanted to raise a few things that I think the questions which remain to be addressed from my anecdotal autobiographical account, I mean, where does it leave us? I think there is one issue which has to be addressed frontally, is what is the role of food and the relationship with governance in a secular state. If we are a secular state, does the government absolve itself of all responsibility of law and order when some goons go and kill a person in the privacy of his house, in front of his children in Dadri, because somebody has spread a rumor somewhere that he is eating beef? So I mean, I think there are too many sacred cows in this country, and I think it's time that the state in a secular democratic republic stop this nonsense. We also are very agitated about what is happening to the federal polity and the federal constitution in Nepal. I think we should realize that we are also a federation of flavors. We are a federation of tastes. We also have states who eat differently. And I don't want to talk about linguistic states. I think people in different castes, communities, and I'm very indebted to my colleague, erstwhile colleague in JNU, Professor Gopal Guru, who once said that there is a hierarchy of food. A Brahman decides what is good food, sattvic or otherwise, but the long and short is that the tamasic food is also, some people require tamasic food. Convalescents, laborers, people who work very hard, corporate warriors, they need a different, like Phelps needing so many 7,000 calories in a day to do his Olympic medals. So different strokes for different folks. But does the government ensure? Then there is a politics of food and business. And two small quick examples. Everybody would recall the Maggi fiasco, and the Maggi has come back with a bang. But what were the two issues? Was Maggi good for the Indian consumer or not? Was the 2-minute Maggi noodles laced with lead or monosodium glutamate or not? But the conversation was interesting that the people who commanded billions, and I think one factory in Moga makes 9 tons of Maggi noodles every day, you can multiply it by 365 and you can see how much profit is raking in for Nestle, food major. But the interesting part was this, Nestle's argument was that no lab in India is equipped enough to test the quality of Maggi because the FDA in USA has certified it fit for human consumption. Now, fit for human consumption in India to be certified by FDA makes me bristle. I mean, I don't think that the cytosanitary conditions should be certified by an agency outside, Swadeshi, Videshi, etc. is besides the point. It brought back memories of an earlier episode. How did Pepsi and Coke get out of this country and come back? Coke did not come back easy. This was 1977, post-emergency. George Fernandez was on a trip of his own. He came with computers, the Coca-Cola company also out and Pepsi out. They wanted to come back when the Janata government was out of power. And 77 had bombed. Thumbs Up had replaced Coke to an extent which they haven't been able to kill it till this date. After having bought it, they couldn't kill the brand. But the interesting part was that Pepsi gave an undertaking that they would come in a sector to promote agricultural development in India in the food sector. They would bring in improved categories of rice, potatoes and so on, and then come back through the back door. They did come in through, some of you would recall the Leher Pepsi Bhujia, but the Bikaneri Halwais got the better of them. Haldiram decided to upgrade his packaging, do his marketing better, shoot down his rivals in Calcutta, but that's another different story. But they never could make an inroad. There was this conversation between, I still recall the program between Varka Dutt and Mr. Sinha, who used to be then the CMD of Pepsi, or Coke, and there was a Coke representative as well, that they were depleting underwater, poisoning underwater, and the portability of their soft drinks was bad. And immediately the response was that the government has failed to provide safe drinking water 60 years or 60 odd years after independence, and they should blame us. We are still giving you something which is much better than the drinking water which an average Indian drinks at home or in the office. So I think there is this relationship between food and governance where the government, I think, is duty bound to ensure the safety of the food with the citizen consumer. And then it leads us to the realm of not only the multinationals, the food chains, the fast foods, the poisoning, the sanitary conditions, it also leads to food adulteration. And this brings me back, takes me back, not brings me back actually, to be grammatically correct, I think. It takes me back to Mukteshwar Sarkar 1955. There was black market, there was hoarding. We were much too close to partition, we were much too close to the Second World War, and old habits die hard. But there was little food adulteration. I mean, I had heard the word desi ghee till I came to Delhi. There was just ghee and tea. There was nothing in between. And IBRI was one of the places where they tested dalda to originate to begin with. And dalda, now like Colgate, is a generic name. But then nobody called it Vanaspati. They said once Vanaspati was made to look like ghee through hydrogenation and nickel particles in that, which made the third generation of rats blind and imported. But that's another story. But the point is, there was far little adulteration. There were not these gory stories about khoya made from detergent, urea put into milk and things of that kind. So again, what happens to food adulteration? What happens to toxicity in our food? Doesn't government have a responsibility in that? And how does this relationship get transformed? I mean, isn't there a transformative relationship between consumer consciousness and what is the person who's dying of hunger worried about what he's getting? Because the great Mr. Bazin of the Commonwealth Organizing fame said we have different standards of hygiene in this country when stinking toilets were exposed on TV cameras. So do we accept the logic that a poor man is condemned and doomed to eat inferior, toxic, contaminated food, and he should be grateful because the Maimam Sarkar has made it available to him? Or should the public distribution system be dismantled to an extent where it is only a breeding ground of corruption? I still recall a shop in between. In my autobiography, I stayed for a short while in a place called Bhavani, where a freedom fighter had got a ration shop as a special quota and a favor. And he educated me. He said, ration shop, nobody comes to buy any stuff, but I have made my money by selling empty sacks. So obviously I'm selling the rest of the sugar and things in that market. So isn't there a systematic symbiotic relationship between corruption and governmental controls of food distribution? Food rotting in FDI silos, isn't there something to be done about that? We say, oh, we can sustain 2 years of drought or bad monsoon because we have enough food. And all of us have seen those pictures of rat infestations and food spoiling because of rain and so on and so forth. So there is this thing. And I think finally, I think what Sohail said in the beginning, the issue of Desi, Swadeshi, Videshi and Antarashtriya, Indian, local, global and international has to be addressed. You have food markets plastered over the import of food from Australia, from Thailand, from Malaysia, from even America, Canada, and duties have been reduced. You have salmon, which is from Norway, from Scotland, and you take it for granted that is better. You go to a restaurant and food and fashion and food and advertisements and what the government can do about it is, I think, also interesting. Everybody is worried about beef. They are welcome to their worries. But what about a lamb which has come from New Zealand, which is a 6-month-old carcass? Is the cold chain in the hotel good enough? I was eating recently in a 5-star hotel, free of course, as a food critic, and some mussels came my way, and I couldn't eat because the mussels were closed. They had not opened. So, I mean, they were a sure recipe for food poisoning. And when it was pointed out, some other people say, on my plate also there is a mussel which has not opened out. So I think, isn't there a responsibility that if you are a rich sucker, you are welcome to your way to hell. You get food poisoned on seafood and go your way, goodbye cruel world and not so cruel world, you are welcome here. But if this continues, isn't there some kind of a regulation which should be there on both advertising about what is good or bad, whether it is a McDonald's chain, whether it is a Pizza King's chain? We are very happy that we have transformed the foreign food. So the pizza has a paneer topping, the burger has a aloo tikki. And we are so happy that we have conquered the world that we are not worried that it is the McDonald's which is laughing their way to bank, it is the young food which is laughing their way to the bank. And we still say, oh, it's very nice, there's a peer group pressure is there, I have a Coke or a Pepsi with my meal, and that's it. Or I have a bottled water, I'm very happy not to see any bottled water here, but it presumably has come from one of the bottles which is poured. They have saved on costs, good for them, good for old world hospitality. But that's what I think concerns me. I think, first of all, there is this lot of this talk about climate of intolerance. And I think, what is this nonsense of intolerance? Diversity is not to be tolerated, it is to be celebrated. And I think the other problem is that the oft-quoted Nehruvian phrase is unity in diversity. I think it is time that Nehru was fond of Seychelles, that we did a headstand on this. We should look for diversity and unity, not the other way around. That's what I have to say. I will be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pushpesh Bhai. And as I had hoped, Pushpesh Bhai has always been extremely thought-provoking, and he has opened up a whole lot of things, the connections between what you want to eat, what you can eat, and governance, and the relations between democracy and what you eat and how you eat, and what we are doing to ourselves and our country, and the way MNCs and their food chains, and we are becoming a part of all that, and the connection of all that to the idea of India and what we are making of it. So there's a large number of openings that he has created, and all of them, I'm sure, need serious contemplation and discussion. And I hope that we have questions where we can start this debate. Anyone with a question, please? Yeah.
Sir, there are many government functions being organized, and food is served in those functions, and it is paid by the exchequer of the government. So how is it non-vegetarian food is also served and government is paying for it? So is it not a discrimination, someone who is a vegetarian, because non-vegetarian people can eat vegetarian food, but a vegetarian will not eat the non-vegetarian food. So,
Two short points. I have yet to come across a governmental function where money is not wasted, so both non-vegetarian and vegetarian foods are served. One thing which I have failed to mention is that the government should do something. I mean, whether government should do something or we should do something is also an issue about manufacturing taste. To borrow Chomsky's phrase, there is this manufactured consent, manufactured dissent, to quote Mr. Jaitley. There is a manufactured taste. You go anywhere from a marriage to a funeral, the food is the same. Kali dal, mani dal, vendi dal, paneer, ki sabzi, kadai gur, and jalebi and rabdi and halwa. So the government also works within the ambit of the manufactured taste. If you go to a function of Ministry of External Affairs, you probably would have a more quote-unquote civilized food because they are higher up on the food chain order. But if you are in the rural development, child and family welfare, probably the food is lower down. But the point which you are making is interesting. Why should the food be served which is more than a working lunch in any government function I have failed to realize? Why should there be a function where there is a dawat for everybody? कि आज बड़ा साहब आया तो आज सब लोग खाएंगे. But that way, I had a different take on this, I must confess to you. I always thought that the marriage banquets were a wasteful expenditure. Till I started working as a caterer and discovered that lots of people get their only nice meal, the tambu wala, tent wala, bartan wala, plate dhone wala, who eat to their heart's content, not the leftovers, but a meal every day which is being cooked there. And some of them get fed up and say, aaj nahi khayenge. So lots of people eat off that and live off that, that's one. But I agree to the point, but I am not so sure about the vegetarian argument. Count your blessings. If this government continues, very soon you will be having all vegetarian meals and upwas on the Prime Minister already serves a largely vegetarian meal even when the American President comes here. I mean, one token non-vegetarian dish is there, if there, and Obama is lucky he's a special friend. Otherwise, you will have dhoklas coming out of US and India's coming out of the South and things of that kind. So I think you don't be in a hurry. I mean, you will have more than your vegetarian contentment in the winter of our discontent.
I'll just like to add one little thing. Where they serve vegetarian food and where they serve vegetarian and other food, there is a clear pecking order. So, for example, the National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration only serves vegetarian food. They organize week-long, 2-week-long, 3-week-long workshops for principals from small districts and all that, who they are telling how to make education into a service and not into something that the government should provide, and why fees should be increased and all that. But they are all fed vegetarian food, unless the Secretary of Education is attending. So there is a clear pecking order. Yesterday I have taken some people for a walk to Humayun's tomb yesterday. These are the equivalent of the Comptroller and Auditor Generals of account of 33 third world countries. And they were given a fairly lavish spread on the terrace of a 5-star hotel. So there are pecking orders. And but the other question which you have raised about vegetarian and non-vegetarian. First of all, I don't think there is anybody called non-vegetarian. There are vegetarians and there are people who eat everything. Within that there could be classifications. You don't eat this kind of meat, but there is nobody who is purely non-vegetarian. Because if they were purely non-vegetarians, they will not be human beings. So they have to eat pulses, they have to eat greens, and they have to eat, grains and so on and so forth. We have created strange categories of food. Go to any restaurant and the large number of these places that you have, say in Pandara Road or in Shankar Market and that area. You get this menu. There is something called Indian. Next to that is South Indian. South Indian is not Indian. Then you have Mughlai. Now, first of all, the word itself is wrong. It should be Mughaliya, but it is. Somebody mispronounced it, so it becomes Mughlai. Now, the Mughals never ate this food. I can promise you. Because the spices that go into the so-called Mughlai, 90% of them didn't exist in India 400 years. They've all come subsequently in the last 2-3 years. So there is Indian, there is South Indian, there is Mughlai, then there is Chinese.
You forgot tandoori.
Tandoori. But tandoori is a subset of Mughlai. Now the interesting thing is, Indian is supposed to be vegetarian. What are you saying? All non-vegetarian food is not Indian. Only Indian food is vegetarian. But look at it closely.
And South Indian.
Yeah, and South Indian. But look at the Indian menu closely. There are no vegetables. There is paneer, which the Portuguese brought to India. There is mushroom, which we did not have, we did not cultivate it till the 1960s, till the IARI developed the technology and trained people. There is mutton, which is not Indian. And you have dal tadka and this paneer in about 200 varieties, but it's all paneer.
Even tomatoes and potatoes are not.
Yes, they are not Indian. But you have no greens. There are just no greens except for paneer, and you present that as vegetarian food. And everybody goes and that we are vegetarians. Where are the vegetables? So we have created, as Pushpesh was saying, we have created these categories, and this is what absolutely manufacturing taste.
One thing you did mention something about the public exchequer and the public paying for it. The argument is that the vegetarian meal is a cheaper meal, which again is a myth. Which again is a myth, because if you compare the prices, paneer, a good quality paneer is close to 300 rupees a kilo, and a poor dead murga is about 200 rupees a kilo. So kilo by kilo, the vegetarian meal, if you have a better quality of the vegetarian meal, is far more expensive.
But there is one more. I'll just add to that, which is if you are throwing a party, the non-vegetarian, the so-called non-vegetarian, will be happy with a korma, a biryani, and a kebab. His day is made. The vegetarians have this tremendous, and this is something that happens in Delhi primarily, and to some extent in the north. The vegetarians have convinced themselves that their food is inferior. So you have to have 20 dishes. And work out the per capita cost. You find out that non-vegetarian meal, roti, korma, biryani, kebab, and compared to kele ki chutney, 2 paneer ki sabzi, 2 green vegetables, 2 tarah ki dal, achar, chutney, raita, 3 tarah ki roti, puri, papad, all that works out to be far more expensive. And they still feel, उनको तो मीट खिला दिया यार. But what will you do?
Sorry, I have a question. आपके यहाँ कोई सब्जी हमारी नहीं है, पर बंगाल, बिहार, हर जगह कितनी तरीके की सब्जी, मूली है.
उन्होंने ये नहीं कहा कि हमारी सब्जी नहीं है. उन्होंने कहा कि दिल्ली में किसी रेस्टोरेंट का मेन्यू उठा के देख लीजिए, उसमें सब्जी लगा रहती है. उन्होंने ये नहीं कहा कि हमारी सब्जी नहीं है. मगर आप दिल्ली में परवल मांग के देख लीजिए. मैं परसों खाना खा रहा था मांझ भात नाम के रेस्टोरेंट में, जो उड़िया रेस्टोरेंट गुड़गांव में है. उनके मेन्यू में परवल लिखा था. मैंने परवल मांगा, परवल नहीं था. मैंने बैंगन मांगा, बैंगन नहीं था. तो कुल मिला के उन्होंने भी दे हैव टू लिव इन दिल्ली और गुड़गांव और एनसीआर, तो उनके मेन्यू में है, मगर उन्होंने कहा कोई मांगता नहीं है, पहले ऑर्डर दे दीजिए तो बना दें.
लेकिन सर आप वहाँ देखेंगे एक सात्विक रेस्टोरेंट है सेलेक्ट सिटी वॉक में, बिग बॉम फ्यूरी है, शाहपुर जाट में पॉटपेरी है. तो उन्होंने काफ़ी इंडिजिनियस जो वेजिटेबल्स हैं उनकी काफ़ी डिशेस निकाली हैं. मैं भी माइक्रोबायोटिक कोच हूँ यहाँ पे, और वेजिटेरियन नॉन वेजिटेरियन अब तो हम सब वीगनिज्म की तरफ पहुँच रहे हैं. और वो खास करके वो खाना महंगा होता है क्योंकि हमें वैरायटी देनी पड़ती है लोगों के टेस्ट बड्स को इम्प्रूव करने के लिए या उनको एक्सेप्ट करने के लिए भी. तो एक चिकन रख दें उससे 10 बहुत लोग खुश हो जाते हैं, लेकिन हम 3-4 तरीके की पालक का कबाब रखें या कुछ रखें तो वो सेटिस्फाई नहीं हो पाते.
नहीं, आई थिंक यार दिस इज simply a long and involved discussion. ये रेस्टोरेंट्स के आप नाम मेंशन कर रही हैं, they I would say are passing facts. You always have ethnic ethnic restaurant with a theme, either organic or Bihari or उड़िया में भी ढेंकनाल का था कि जगत सिंहपुर का था, बिहार में था तो मगधी था, मगही है कि भोजपुरी है कि मैथिली है कि आरा वाला है कि वो किशनगंज वाला है, पूर्णिया वाला है, तो यू कैन गेट इनटू द, और कोस्टल है तो मलमानी है कि सिंधुदुर्ग है, तो दैट इज दिस होल साइकिल हैज गॉन ओवर डेली मोर देन वंस. जैसे इन्होंने तंदूरी भी कहा ना, somebody did raise a very interesting question about तंदूरी. तंदूरी what? खैबर वाला तंदूरी या मोती महल वाला तंदूरी? मोती महल वाला तंदूरी, खैबर वाला तंदूरी या कंधार वाला तंदूरी, या बलूची या पिंड बलूची वाला तंदूरी? So I mean, tandoor is distributed if you go over Ranjit Rai's book from Mohenjo-daro to Lothal to next door to Haryana. तो तंदूर is a clay oven. उसमें तंदूरी ये जो टिक्के हैं और जो तंदूरी बन रहा है, ये जो तंदूरी मुर्ग है, अब तो वो तो मतलब कुंदन लाल जी के साहबजादे तो कहते हैं कि उनके वालिद ने बटर चिकन बनाया, जबकि हकीकत तो ये कि कितने सारे ढाबे वालों को बासी चिकन जब सर्कुलेट करना था तो टमाटर की ग्रेवी, मखनी ग्रेवी काम में आई. So, but what you are saying is, I am not saying that people like you are not making an honest effort to reintroduce vegetables, but take the turnover of something like the restaurant Shahpur Jat or the South. I mean, you are catering to a niche market, and you are not catering to the. You are not. I mean, I'm sorry to say this because you are doing a genuinely good job, I know, but the problem is that you are not going to make a dent in the eating habits of people. Sunita Narayan, who works out of this complex, has been working on good food and bad food, and her health report this year has a section on bad food and toxicity in the first food. But how many people eat ramdana, amaranthus? How many people eat makhana? आप उनको शौकिया एक दिन खिला दीजिए, आप आलू का चोखा उनको खिला देंगे, बट आई कैन गारंटी कि आज भी आप मुझे परवल तो शाहपुर जेट में नहीं खिला पाएंगे, बिकॉज आपको मिलेगा नहीं. When we are doing these curated meals, which he wrote down on with good reason, he is one of the good friends who has corrected me about a bad menu, including Rahul Verma. उसे ये सब क्या घास फूस खिला रहे हो? Not घास फूस in the sense that he was not a, he said out of season खाना क्यों खिला रहे हो? So I think it was true, but I was also making a compromise curating this meal because this was being done at IIC next door, and I don't wish to speak against them here or perish the thought over managed body. But the point is कि बाजार में मिली नहीं वो सब्जी. अगर आपने कहा मुझे इतना कुल्था चाहिए, इतना बथुआ चाहिए, तो I mean they have to source it. There is a system in a hotel or in a restaurant. I can't buy it. I mean I did buy certain things. I never got reimbursed because it was not in the system. I am not complaining about the reimbursement, but I couldn't buy enough of a vegetable out of season in Delhi because nobody. फालसा ले लीजिए, आप फालसा ले लीजिए, आप जामुन ले लीजिए, आपको इतना बड़ा जामुन मिलेगा 5 रुपए का एक आलू के ब्रेस के सामने, more expensive than a gulab jamun. So the vegetables have gone down that route that people don't buy vegetables, especially squash vegetables. आप कहिए मुझे सूखा पेठा चाहिए, सूखा पीला कद्दू, वो आपको मिलेगा नहीं, कुबड़ा नहीं मिलेगा. तो I'm not arguing with you that not at cross purposes. I'm only saying that you have a tough battle ahead of you.
I have one more question for Abse. Being a Brahmin myself, I propagate good dosh balance and macrobiotic food, clean eating. तो जब हम
what is it that what you do?
मुझे यही समझना है कि this is what I have to understand. Whenever me, my surname, I give talks in
I would suggest, with no offense meant to you, Neha, do what my son did. The first thing he did was to drop his surname.
Yes, I should.
So that's one. Then the problem is there is nothing.
But I have
Caste
been
has
attacked
nothing.
by two
No, I tell you,
communities
no,
verbally that because you are a
No,
Brahmin, you are propagating things, which is not true at all.
But Neha, let me be a devil and quote you the scriptures. All the Hindus have no scriptures.
Okay.
There is Gita, Bhagavad Gita. Please get a copy as fast as you can.
Yeah.
A free copy is available from this one. A 4 copy is available from Gita Press Gorakhpur.
Yeah.
17th chapter discusses 3 kinds of people, 3 kinds of food. And it discusses Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. And it goes into the Kaf, Pitta, Vaj, Gun. And elementary mathematics of class 9th will tell you that 3 to 2, the permutation combination is 6. So there are 6 types of basic food, 6 types of basic people, 6 types of imbalances in roughly translated humors. You don't need to read anything more than that. And Rizio, of course, is a scholar of Sankhya. You could go into Panchabhuts, Mahabhuts, Tanmatras, which is the basis of this Guna-dosh theory, which is the Tasir theory in the Unani system, or the Yin-Yang in the Chinese system. But the whole point is it has nothing to do with caste system at all. Krishna himself was not a Brahmin, he was a Yadav. Arjuna, who was being of doubtful parentage, was probably a Kshatriya. born in vitro fertilization or something of that kind. So the point is, what are we talking about? Caste system has nothing to do.
Exactly.
I mean, with
How do we change this perception, sir? Because
by eating wrong.
no, I will not propagate McDonald's KFC. Just
I'm not suggesting that you eat McDonald's.
Yeah.
See, this is the saddest part, that you will go to a high-grade spa. Why should I name him? I mean, he's my friend, the one spa in Dehradun, where they would give you a pizza with organic vegetables produced in their garden. But why pizza? Why not a सीधी सादी मोटी रोटी और सब कुछ यहाँ का है? Why should you have a hamburger which is a sattvic hamburger? Why not have a अच्छी खासी खिचड़ी? मेरे मुंह में पानी ला दिए, एक कबाब हो जाए. He is not a hard to please non-vegetarian. एक कबाब हो जाए, एक कोरमा हो जाए, एक रोटी हो जाए, एक बिरयानी हो जाए, थोड़ी फिरनी मिल जाए तो फाइन हो जाए. और क्या चाहिए? मेरा कहना है कि why not a one dish meal? Why not a खिचड़ी? Why not a खिचड़ी every day of your life? Why not a मूंग की खिचड़ी, उड़द की खिचड़ी, दही वाली खिचड़ी, बंगाली खिचड़ी, पतली वाली खिचड़ी? I mean, you can go berserk on खिचड़ीs. and why not the dals? I mean, he mentioned a very interesting thing. This gets my quote. Tadka dal, yellow dal. What is yellow dal? Yellow is a color. I mean, you travel. You come from those parts. You travel by road from Delhi to Benares. Somewhere near Kanpur, there is a sharp dividing line, which is I call the dal divide. उसके बाद ढाबे में काली दीवार देखने को नहीं मिलती, थैंक गॉड. उसके बाद तड़का दाल मिलती है, मगर आपको तड़का दाल को येलो दाल नहीं कहता. आपको चना मिलेगा, आपको धुली उड़द मिलेगी, आपको धुली मूंग मिलेगी, आपको पीली दाल की 5 वैरायटी बिना छिलकी की मसूर मिलेगी, और उनकी पांचों के मिले वर्जन्स मिलेंगे. So I think there is enough variety in the desi food of this country, including the coarser grade. And one of the good doctors will tell you one day, the coarser you eat, the smoother it comes out the next morning. So you should also start getting interested. You are into the organic business. कि millets क्या होते हैं? कि मडुआ क्या होता है? Mudwa is not ragi. Ragi and Mudwa is not jowar. And here people are going berserk eating oats का दलिया. Quaker oat नहीं तो सफोला का, सफोला तो बागड़ी का है. Feel very happy कि मैं उसका वो खा रहा हूँ. I mean, I think your recipe book, I'm sure will have lots of more interesting stuff. But I think you should keep 2 things clear. You are doing a great job, and you should keep your caste out of it. Number one. No. I mean it very seriously, and I take this liberty of saying this because I have known your parents and I have known you before, and I don't fall into this trap that my being a Hindu or my having been born in a particular caste has anything to do with what I rationally think about food. The problem between religion, bad religion, and good science is this: that good science is empirical, based on reason. Bad religion is based on faith and no logic. So I will not accept a religious taboo. I might get lynched, somebody might black in my face, but I will keep going like this, that I think beef was eaten in many times. It's documented. So let's not worry about that. And if you want to have this empty debate about beef, then all food is folded. So one must, if you take your food seriously, take a stand and say it is an accident of birth. I was born in a Brahmin family, and it's like somebody, like a frozen cake. Your parents might be very unhappy. Oh my God, I wish you were not born. The same-sex marriage you are thinking of is almost as bad as that. आप beef भी खाते हैं, आप तो beef somebody did say so. आप तो जीबी में रहे हैं, तो आप beef खाते होंगे. मैं आज से नहीं खाता था, जीबी में आने के पहले से खाता था. मेरे बाप खाते थे, मेरे दादा खाते थे, वो जात बाहर कर दिए गए थे. And after that we had liberation. अगर दादाजी जात बाहर हो गए तो बचा क्या था? मेरे को टेंशन ही नहीं था.
Just one little thing. You began by saying I am a Brahmin and I am.
I've been attacked several times verbally when I
because
take lectures
in any case,
workshop.
those people need to be also to be educated. Even today, a large proportion of Brahmins in this country are meat eaters.
My father is sir.
I'm not talking of individuals. I'm talking of entire communities.
Kashmiri Brahmins are meat eaters.
Oriyas
are
also.
meat eaters. Oriyas are meat eaters. Maithil Brahmins are meat eaters.
Bengali
This is the
Brahmins,
general
Assam
perception.
Brahmins.
All Shaktas are meat eaters and treat Bali as a pisang.
This is a general perception, but still I get this.
No,
And
but
I don't know how to combat it.
you see, the general perception, what we call general perception in this country, are North Indian upper caste male perceptions which have been forced down everybody's
Of the Kane ko please Biswa.
Yes, yes, yes. Kane ko Biswa karenge. Yeah.
Sir, you referred to the Domino's, introducing paneer on pizzas and tandoori paneer and the tandoori chicken. What happens to, and theirs is a conscious marketing strategy. But what about, when the chow mein at the vans or the sambar, when there's this constant, say a Punjabification or the adding of the garam masala when, these foods travel, do we hold on to a sense of, say, authentic taste? Or are, or how much of the fusion or, which happens is acceptable or, is consciously or unconsciously happening as, food tastes travel geographically?
I think you are raising a very interesting question. There is no such thing as authentic. And there is no such thing as a Goldilocks one size fits all solution in food at all. But look at what he said about what is India and where the food has come from. On a day of fasting, a ritual Brahmanical food is made of potatoes which came from Indies via Portuguese. You have a puja ritual where you put a pan ka patta which came 2000 years ago from Southeast Asia. You have vegetarian food, tomatoes, which are an import, बिलायती बेगून है. आपका खाने में post-Columbian exchange is so strong that what you call Indian is not Indian. There always has been a fusion. There always has been a fusion. I'm very glad you mentioned noodles because the story goes back to Marco Polo. Do you believe the canard that Marco Polo brought the noodles from China? Or would you be with the Italians that he took the noodles with him originally to China and the China replicated it and did it much better than before? And if vermicelli and sevaiya has been in India for say 600 years, I mean, where do we say who is the original santan of this nation? कौन आया था? आर्य पहले आए थे या Indus Valley civilization वाले रह रहे थे या Aboriginal people or the Gondwana land people or the South Indians which are not part of India anymore? The original Adi Dravids, not even the Dravids, the Adi Dravids. I mean, let's not talk about the Dravids, let's not talk about Amma, let's not talk about, she's not in the comedian come to think of it, But let's not, Chennai is in a bad shape, so I'll not speak against the replicate people. The Kachari season has been ruined there. But the point is that that's what he said, that what the North Indian Portuguese Biswa have done, the Tambrams, the Ayers and the Iyengars have done, that's out there. And unfortunately, what you are asking is a difficult question to answer. Let it flow. I mean, if you imbibe an influence, what's wrong about having a Chinese food which is soaked in tomato ketchup? Because tomato ketchup is originally a Chinese discovery, not an American concoction. So the ketchup is a Chinese one. And then the borderline in the fuzzy areas, where in the stock of Nepal and the momos, the dividing line between a momo and a dimsum and a suimai is a degree of sophistication. The relationship between Prakrit and Sanskrit language. A cruder, a prototype, and a more sophisticated version. So you have an interesting relationship between food evolving. So you have a paneer dosa now. You also have an egg dosa. You have a green dosa.
And keema dosa.
And keema dosa is not a new invention.
No.
Keema dosa used to be there in the corner shop called Coffee House as seller way back 50 years back. And then it went out of fashion. So I do feel that certain things will evolve. Samosa has a history which goes back 1500 years or so. Pulao has a history which goes back more than 1500 years ago. So it starts as palav, il bhav prakash nigantu, meat cooked with rice with condiments. It's a Central Asian palav, but a biryani is something totally different. And a biryani in India is not what is in Iran.
And the biryani in Hyderabad is entirely
different from a goli biryani or a kachi biryani. So I do think that in this country, you look, I mean, what he said is a very, very interesting point. I have made it somewhere in print, that there is no such thing as an Indian food. There are multiple Indian cuisines, and they are akin to a mighty river system, where there is an origin of a river, there is a tributary, there is a contributory, there is a confluence, and the river changes character. Take Kaveri, from Thala Kaveri to Pumpuhar. The river is finger thin at Thala Kaveri, and again is a tired river at Pumpuhar or thereabouts. So if you follow the river, but at Shiv Samudra is a mighty road falling over the waterfall. It happens to all rivers, to Ganga, to Brahmaputra, to Narmada, to Tapti, to Godavari, to Krishna. Name a river. Satluj, India, where the Indus is young, near Upasi in Ladakh, you think you can jump across it. And then you have the mighty Indus where it meets the ocean. So I think that culinary schools, styles, have evolved like rivers. They change course, they carry effluents, and there is no purity in any river's water. They are muddy, they are solid, and they change. So I think that happens to food. With Chimman Valley biryani, take a shahi tukda. The bread came with Portuguese. What was the shahi tukda before that? Before that was a Malai ka tukda.
And cooked in shirma.
And cooked in shirma. So the leavened bread came with some other people. So there has been a silk route, and there has been a spice route, and there has been a pilgrim route, and there has been the march of armies, and the food over the subcontinent has changed from Darya Khyber to Arakan, from Himalaya to the oceans. Always.
Hello, I'm a doctor, and we were taught by our teacher if nobody is pure non-vegetarian or vegetarian. Look, what is the source of milk? It's a non-vegetarian, but it is taken in the vegetarian. That's all.
And you know, this new fad called vegans have taken it to the next level, where all this milk, cheese, and cottage cheese and butter and cream and all that, it is all a strict no-no because this is animal produce.
Even honey.
Yes, animal produce. So if you want to vegetate yourself.
Good evening, sirs. So my question is, sir, right now at the social front, we are facing a lot of issues, like you mentioned, the intolerance issue, inequality, gender oppression, and many. And many of these issues can be also linked to food to an extent as well. Intolerance.
And governance.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. With respect to intolerance, we have the beef issue, inequality, we have corrupted PDS and food safety. And gender oppression, there is a funny contradiction that we are empowering cows, but we can't empower women in this country. So we are so much attracted to the Western philosophy when it comes to many issues of our social front. At the roots of many of this issue, we tend to compare ourselves to the Western living standards, their clothing, their food habits. So sir, my question is, how much has this universalization of Western philosophy has affected our inherent and culture-driven lifestyle with respect to all these issues, food and oppression and intolerance? Thanks.
You ask a difficult question to answer because you frame your question in terms which I find myself a little uncomfortable to handle. You say Western philosophy. So are we talking of Western philosophy or Western civilization, or are we talking of Western lifestyle? Because if you are talking of Western ideas, more than beyond philosophy, more mundane, Sohail Bhai just whispered into my ears, what about the concept of democracy? It is a Western concept. Have we accepted it, or have we are only paying lip service to it? We talk in terms of liberty, but how many Indians, even who have done their masters in political science, have read Mill in original at all, even a small extract? Or do they think that I would much rather stay with my Indian self as long as my privileged hierarchical position is preserved? As long as it suits me, the freedom of expression is fine. But the other person's freedom of expression is intolerable for me. This is what is happening in contemporary India. That I think is, and I think the point needs to be made. It has not happened in past 1.5 years. Things have become much worse in past 1.5 years. But it has been a slow process where we have all been a party by remaining silent. That slowly our rights have eroded. And that's why I started this talk with you with my childhood into 50 years back. 50 years back there was inequity, but it's shameful that 50 years down the road it is worse. If there was intolerance and growing intolerance 50 to 60 years ago, and it is much worse today. And that is, I think, what is more worrying about. And I think the topic of the discussion should not stray too much away from food. I mean, my obsession makes me do that. But I would advise you, the rest of you gentlemen and ladies, that you should stay with the governance part. What is, I mean, the food seems to be having all the questions, curiosities are related to food. Why are they not related to the governance as well as the relationship between governance and food?
I have it's more of a, I'm seeking a comment from you as I hear you and I look at the topic. And as you said, if you just focus more on governance, two things that come up is one, we have seen in the last a decade or so that there has the relationship between governance and corporates have changed, especially in the food sector. The dying out of the PDS, the dying out of the farm extension centers are all have been fallout of this. It's also changed the way we look at the food basket. Today, whether the government's helped it in terms of space, money, and the advertising money which is coming, we see a lot of giants coming in. We can't deny it. I'm not saying the good or bad of it. The other thing that which is observed is that a core function of the government, which is to protect people, has failed, especially minorities. And I'm not just focusing today, without giving any reference. I come from a minority community in a certain area, and I have seen as tensions have built up, one of the things which the families have hold on to closer have been food traditions. That, preserving traditions and food have been a major part of it. So, is it true that in duress, it's natural that while we embrace a larger food culture, which is the world, we tend to hold on to our tradition more against our nearest neighbors? So maybe somewhere, is it true that, I don't know if food cultures have an effect on governance, but maybe transformative governances do have effect on food cultures and how we look at food. It's something I would like to ask.
Again, a complicated question and a difficult question to answer. I think it's very nice to put the label as food cultures. But it brings us to the definitional challenge that do we identify with any culture before you say, I belong to a minority community. She said, I belong to a particular caste. That leaves me in a very difficult position. What am I? Am I a person born a Brahman whose ancestor lost caste? A person who's male by gender identity, upper middle class most of his life, never suffered pangs of hunger. What is my food culture? Am I eclectic enough, Catholic enough, open-minded enough to eat beef, eat seafood, eat in the Chinese food festival, just stop short of eating a monkey's brain, but the rest I have eaten comfortably. I have drawn the line in dog in Nagaland because I am a dog lover, but that's where the problems start. So my son said, you are chicken, variety. But the point is, food culture is a difficult business. Is there such thing called food culture? I don't think so. There is a category of culture, and the food or cuisine is a subset of that. And in a country like India, you posed your question in larger economic, socio-economic context, why should I worry about embracing a world culture of food? Isn't India large enough a universe with diversity, ranging from different communities, different ethnicities, religions, linguistic identities, to have enough to choose from? Why do I have to have a Thai cuisine, a Mediterranean cuisine? I can pick and choose from Ladakhi to Andaman Nicobar, from Burma border in Manipur, Tripura and Nagaland to Kutch and Sindh and so on, and the heartland, and this full, and that's one part. But the part I am curious is that what you said, the second part of your question, that in times of stress, obviously there is a ghettoization. People would seek security in people of their own kind. But then, at the same time, it doesn't mean that if you are going back to your food traditions or rituals, you necessarily are a person of a narrower mindset. You don't cease to be secular at all. I think what you do in your private life in a secular state is nobody's business. And a secular state has no business to interfere with religious freedoms or cultural freedoms. I think what we should do...
Or choice of food.
Or choice of food. So I think that is what, or choice of attire.
Yes.
People have been defaced, acid has been thrown on their face because they are not conforming to a dress code, Videshi. So people who have several caps that called baseball can wield hockey sticks and big things in a restaurant and Valentine Day is being celebrated. But they will not worry about their sneakers and jeans and baseball caps. So I think the issue of what is Indian and what is acceptably Indian should be debated. And that's where the government should draw a line, to my mind, between threats to law and order and individual liberties and safety, and that's what should be debated. And that's the only culture we should be running, the culture of democracy, the culture of secularism. And we should not be diverted by interesting asides.
I'm not but that's precisely, maybe look, when we're looking at does food cultures change governance, but when the governance fails in a couple of core functions, we do see people either using, something as a counter or defending something.
I again think that I'm a little uncomfortable in the word. Is the present government failing or governance is failing? Let's make a distinction between the word governance, state, government, and the present government. Are all state governments failing in this duty in contemporary India? Or have they constantly failed? Or the present government is failing? Or is it a governance issue where the governed also have to take a more active role? And you elect a government willfully, give it more than a comfortable majority, and then complain about governance, it takes me back to that people deserve the government which they get, or people get the government which they deserve. So, if in a democracy you elect of free will a government, and then you complain about the nature of governance, then you think of non-electoral solutions to it. Are you going to live with for 5 years? Or are you going to say that in a democracy it is not only the government which dispenses? Take a totally different issue. Something is decided by a judiciary or a court of law, and the parliament comes out in its infinite wisdom that the judiciary is transgressing and crossing the Lakshman Rekha, which is a typically Hindu metaphor, and a sexist metaphor as well. Sita was confined behind the Lakshman Rekha. Don't cross this. It was used against a woman. So the point is that this Lakshman Rekha argument upsets me, I think. When it suits us, we have a separation of power. When it suits us, we respect judiciary. When it doesn't suit us, then judiciary is overreaching. So I think we in this country have to worry about governance, which has at least this interesting relationship, not always harmonious, not cozy, between legislature and judiciary, and citizen caught in between.
My question is about food culture. You said that food cultures keep evolving, and if we take currently, there's a lot of talk about going back to the roots. Things like new jargons like gluten-free, and these are coming into picture and widely being used in India. And just like the Brahmins had, there's a class, there's an elite class which is bringing out these kind of food and these jargons. Organic is another word which is being used a lot. So I remember a few years back, this was not part of the food jargon, but now it's catching on. Would you say that it's shaping a new culture, or is it an evolution, or is it going back to roots?
No, I think this is a comparatively easier question to answer. I think it's nothing to do with culture. I think it's something, so all it has got to do is the business of food. If you are into selling food business,
right,
you employ jargon, you employ catchy slogans, you have good advertising copy, you have seduction of the innocents, to borrow one's Pecker's phrase, and you lure people into your tourist traps, whether it is Karim or whether it is an organic food shop, or whether it is a restaurant, a niche restaurant somewhere else. Talking of the broader point, I would still stand by my original statement that I don't think that food culture is a separate culture. A culture of a people evolves, and basically it has a material basis. And then there is nothing more tangible than food as a material basis. Agriculture, food, kitchen, utensils, fuel, distribution of food, allocation, portion, and politics of food. Now, that shapes how we respond to food and to governance and our external belief. Now, taboos, prescriptions, prohibitions, therapeutic, aesthetic dimensions of food, all are covered. Now, what I would say that there is, to answer your question, honestly, it has always happened in human civilization that elites have what you call high culture. Shastri Sangeet and so on. Then there is something which is called Man, which is the folk music, which is the people's culture, which is the pop culture, there is the counter culture, and they coexist. So there is, people have their songs, people have lowbrow Hindi films, and people have art films, and people have somewhere in between semi-art, semi-cultural films, and you have graphic novels, and you have serious graphic novels, and you have pulp, and everything is culture. So it is in the realm of food. So you have kitchen food, you have manufactured food, you have food shoved down your throat, and you are being told it's good. I mean, have blue cheese, it is exotic. It may stink, it may crawl, but you may drink wine, it may taste like vinegar, but you will not say so because the emperor has no clothes. You will say, very good. Do the blind tasting at your home. Dilute your vinegar and palm it off on your guests and say it is wine, it is slightly forensic. And they will say, no, it seems to be all right, it is fruity, it is hints of notes of grass, chestnut, things of that kind. I mean, I have not been conned by this at all. You like something, you eat it. You like something, you wear it. You don't like it, you don't. But there is always a passing fashion. And that passing fashion is used very carefully by people who are in business of selling. So this is good for you. So pay a higher price but eat organic. I don't want to hurt a business, but I think that in this country organic will only succeed when it is affordable for ordinary people. So don't make a fetish out of this. And we the Jwara types from JNU, was kurtas over pants and we had the mufflers before our party had. Forget it. So but the point is that who decided that the stitched clothing came to this country with Syrians? It is not ours. I mean, ours was dhoti and bare body, both Malabar women and the North Indian men, who had nothing to show. In any case, I mean, the weaklings and muscles and so on, but the point is that why are we making a fetish of what is Indian in food and is our culture? I think that's what he began with, that there is a time to have a serious thinking on what is the idea of India. I mean, and the idea of India, unfortunately, is woven with the sacred in this country. I mean, unfortunately I say, because the moment people find out that the sacred is only Hindu is sacred, everything else is profane, then we are in deep trouble. But the problem is that the food culture is not going to make a dent by itself in either governance or change. And the elite must be changed. Why do we concede that the elite will set the trends?
Pushpesh, because we are talking about food cultures, I think I must say that we actually wanted to problematize the term food culture within the context of this lecture. One thing that I want to ask and raise is the question of taste, because when we are trying to problematize food culture, we want to bring taste, the word taste, into the middle of this discussion. Because taste is also about, and also function of food. Because you have, you have situations like the Abad Dharma, where you even if you are you're practicing a certain kind of thing, when it comes to a critical thing, there is a certain function that a particular type of food has, and it has to be taken because your primary function is to save your life, So that kind of a situation. So I want to actually bring this discussion to taste on the one side, and connect it with freedom, where you're saying that you should have the freedom to taste what you like to taste. Beyond the jargon of business, or beyond the identity politics within the cultural thing. So is it possible? And also I want to discuss about what you said, like if a certain, like for instance Potbelly is serving Bihari food, and bringing ingredients from a particular, it gets expensive. Is there a possibility of actually democratizing it, making it, why don't we get it on the streets, for instance?
Now, the point is that we have about 3 minutes to go, and you have raised so many issues that we have
but I think we must.
Because I'm seriously agitated about this, because I think the problem of taste is that the word itself is multi-layered. It's not only confined to food. you say this is in bad taste, what you speak.
Yes.
So the language also has bad taste.
Yes.
Is unparliamentary language or is in bad taste in polite company to say this or wear this. I was going out in my boxers and my son said, what kind of taste you have? There is a young maid there, you are dressed up in a boxer and going out like this. And I mean, there is a prohibition with taste. The lady asked a very interesting question, who's the arbiter of taste? Who decides what is good taste or bad taste? That is what I was saying, that all of us are born in a family and imbibe a taste in a natural inclination for a taste from birth because of household cooking and food. Then we grow up and we acquire a taste, like when we become rich, we start playing golf, smoking cigars, drinking wines. We also start eating different kind of foods. So it's a taste is a function of what kind of an education you have had. Have you gone to Boone or Mayo or Harrow or Eton or gone to under the Pupil Tree School or the municipal Pathshala? And then it depends on what you like or dislike.
Yes.
Are you a man or a woman of certain independence and integrity to say, I tried this, what you said, tasted something, I didn't like it,
Yes.
I won't ever have it again.
Yes.
So that again is an issue of taste. But then the issue is again, who decides what good taste is, what bad taste is, and what taste is good for you seasonally. And that is, again, if you go back to the Desh-Kal theory, the time and place, the seasonality and the region, the season and region decides what the natural inclination for a taste is according to the climate or macroclimatic condition there. So you can say this about the sweet and sour, different parts of India. And sweet and sour in different parts of India is not the same sweet and the same sour. In Bengal it is different from what it is in Gujarat. So I would say that this is much more complicated than dispensing it in a 3-minute response.
Yeah, it is a complex question, but I just wanted to open this because it's also about freedom that we are talking about. I think our primary concern is
Your point is very well taken. Freedom to taste, to
Yes.
my mind, comes after the freedom to eat what you eat.
yes, yes.
Because tasting is a luxury. After I have ensured my survival, and if somebody is going to bash my brain in because I am suspected of eating beef, then tasting is out of question.
You're only going to taste
Because we are talking about governance, which is different from government. Because
Yes.
governance is a participatory thing, like it's a people's thing. So we are also talking about creating a people's movement or a people's thing about this freedom for taste.
Ritu, I'm in entire agreement with you. I think the transformative process has to begin with the individual.
Absolutely.
That's what the poor
Absolutely.
lecture to Neha. I mean, you have to begin changing yourself and your relationship with the government and your
Yes,
relationship with the
absolutely.
food. And then we're talking of a larger category.
Yes.
And you warned me that at 8:30 you have to vacate.
No, we can take another 15 minutes or so.
He's been brilliant.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. It's fine.
No, we are recording.
Thank you. What exactly is the role of the Ministry of Agriculture in bringing transformative governance? And also, do we need a separate Ministry of Food so that we can distinguish between who produces and what we consume? Thank you.
Very good question, sir.
Thank you for asking.
When I was young, and I was young once, believe me, there was only one Ministry of Food and Agriculture. And it was not a cabinet ministry, it was a Minister of State. And I remember in 54-55, it was Kanhaiya Maniklal Munshi, a Hindu revivalist. I mean, if ever there was one. But the point is that let that pass. I think we have created ministries to accommodate people when they have to be given a separate ministry, independent charge or a cabinet ministry, that's one. But the food ministry is an extremely powerful ministry if Mr. Sharad Pawar is the minister. It ceases to be powerful if somebody else is there. And what you said, what role there should be, I don't think that anybody in contemporary India has any capacity to transform besides the Prime Minister. I mean, it's like Amitabh Bachchan. There is one actor, superhero, and then from 1 to 10 you can count any number of heroes. And even in his prime, he is still Amitabh Bachchan. So the problem is that I'm not comparing Mr. Modi to Amitabh Bachchan, perish the thought. But the problem is I'm saying is that your question needs to be answered honestly. Do you think the Minister of Agriculture, you remember his name at the moment?
Radha
I don't, unfortunately. I would have flunked my GS test. But if you, no, but all right. It'll come back.
Radha Mohan Singh, sir.
All right. What are his claims to fame? Is he an agricultural scientist like Mr. M. S. Swaminathan? Is he an activist like Medha Patkar? Has he worked for, like Mr. Joshi, for Shetkari Sangathan somewhere? Has he been an experienced bureaucrat working in the field? Or has he been in food and agriculture minister like Mr. C. Subramanian, who ushered in the Green Revolution?
Maybe he's from Gujarat.
He promotes genetically modified organisms, GM and industrial agriculture, and strongly supports America. That's why he's
No, very. I did not wish to deride him. I'm only saying is that what would be his potential and limitations to work a transformation in the ministry. Now, if the ministry is truncated between food and agriculture, you have a strict dichotomy, then you have somebody else who's doing consumer distribution and so on. So I think the ministries do not have the capacity unless there is a driven person like Mrs. Gandhi at one stage, and the comparison may sound odd like Mr. Modi at the present stage. There are two individuals who to my mind have greater similarities. I mean, if they were unleashing their single-minded vision or drive to constructive purposes, we would probably not be discussing this at the moment. But there is a problem with governance, and there is a problem with food. I mean, the other thing which I did not mention, but it comes back because you asked me, Potti Chatta, you remember? And his murder, you remember? And his brother's murder on the same day, you remember? But few remember that Mr. Potti Chatta's brother, before he said goodbye cruel world, or was forced to say so, had invested in 65,000 hectares of agricultural land in Ethiopia to grow pulses. Do you remember, or are you aware of how many million tons of arhar dal we are importing from Nigeria, from Myanmar, from Canada? This is what the Food and Agriculture Ministry does. They manipulate prices by saying that we are going to import things, whether it's an onion scarcity, sugar scarcity, or a pulses scarcity. So the international market price goes up, and then you import this, and then the prices don't come down at home, and you look after everything. So the Agriculture Ministry and the Agricultural Prices Commission under it look after the manipulation of prices. We may have dismantled the Planning Commission, but we still have ministries, and ministries are self-perpetuating bureaucracies, as Parkinson said. So it directly relates to who the minister is, and again, as Neha corrected me, and I have forgotten about the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, but he may be a very capable person, but is he a political heavyweight? Does he carry enough weight to have his say? And then you could ask that question about any minister. But then you could ask that question about Mrs. Gandhi's cabinet also. It was famously said that she was the only person in her cabinet who wore pants. She was like Margaret Thatcher. So I mean, I am not running down the present dispensation on that ground. But the grounds of criticism are totally different. I mean, they are of a mindset which doesn't accept dissent. That is what we are worried
about. We are saying that there is no authenticity in Indian food. It has come from authenticity or authentic food in Indian sense.
Can I interrupt you at this stage? How do you define authentic?
Yeah, I know that there is nothing. I mean, it has been, there's an enmeshing of different kind of cuisines. But my question is,
A recipe is either a family recipe or a chef's recipe. There is nothing standardized or authentic about it.
Yeah, so
and my problem, why I interrupted you, if you will forgive me, is because I think that there is no such thing as an Indian food. There are Indian foods. I mean, South Indian food is India. Naga food is India, Kashmiri food is India, Gujarati food is India, Muslim food is India, Parsi food is India, Brahmin food is India, and Dalit food is India. So what are we talking about? And all of them have imbibed influences which are not sui generis. They have come from outside, ingredients, cooking techniques. You go to Kerala, where she comes from, and you go to Kochi. There are fishing nets, Chinese fishing nets, and there is something called China chatti, on which an appam is cooked. The clay, the shallow thing is a Chinese import. You have something like halwa, which you put in a prasad, with the word itself comes from Arabic, and the Arabs brought it to this country. So what are we talking about? You go under a different layer, and it is no particularly. I mean, I don't take great pride that the Aryans were the sons of the soil or the horses were brought by them or not. Fine, I'm happy enough to be a hybrid. I'm very happy with my mixed up heritage.
So given that, my question was then, I particularly work on intangible cultural heritage, and we think that.
But food is the most tangible thing. I mean, I was on the distributed committee by the Ministry of Culture to build a brief for the UNESCO that food should be Indian, food should be treated as an intangible cultural heritage. I had problems. I mean, if food is intangible, what else is tangible?
But she's talking about, I mean, you can ask.
If it is intangible or tangible, and then with heritage, there is this concept of preservation or conservation. Then we know then there is nothing authentic, then what would we actually are going to preserve? That was
No. I'm not saying that only authentic should be preserved. Why should not a mixed up Indo-Saracenic bit of architecture deserve to be protected as much as a purely Hindu temple of the Viman Shaili in Patadakal or a Shikhar Shaili in Khajuraho or somewhere else, Nagar in Bhubaneswar? I mean, they are equally worth preserving. If my heritage is a composite culture, my heritage is composite. It has elements of Turco-Afghan, it has elements of Persian, it has elements of Abyssinian African, and I think the greatest synthesis was done in the Mughals by the Dakhli Sultans. I mean, Gawan's Madrasa in Bidar, for instance.
So with conservation, aren't we actually confining it? I mean, we are trying to hold it somewhere and saying that.
You see, talking of food, let me know, I mentioned that the Mughaliya, which is essentially a combination of the, and Pushpesh Bhai will correct me if I am wrong, that the tradition of Bhunai is an Indian creation, to my mind. And the cooking in the oven is Central Asian. These two came here, got together, and the Mughalai was born. Now, the Mughalai is constantly reinventing itself. What remains the constant is the fusion of these two styles of cooking. Similarly, the food on the western coast drew heavily from the Portuguese tradition. And in Pondicherry, they borrowed a whole lot from the French. But what they have created is their unique food. It is this, the uniqueness of the fusion that we need to protect. And I'm underscoring this. This cannot be done by a committee. This will constantly reinvent itself. Just as classical music cannot be preserved, it has to reinvent itself constantly. Music, any aspect of culture is a product of fusion. There is nothing called pure culture. There is nothing called, just as there are no pure races. It is a product of fusion, and it is this fusion that needs to be protected. That is how I would look at preserving heritage. The constant state of flux, allowing it to reinvent itself constantly, that is the space that culture needs. Not definition, this is Indian culture and this is how it needs to be frozen. Then it is dead.
Hi sir, I have a remark, I have a comment with, in order for the organic food movement, because I'm a part of it and I promote it wholeheartedly. And I heard someone say that these food jargons of gluten-free, organic, vegan, macrobiotic, it's all a fad. Bade buzurgon ko bhi lagta hai ki it's just a fad, it's a passing fashion and all of that. In defense of it, I would like to say that everything that you have told me today about Bonti Chatta, his brother, and investing crores and crores of money in different countries to grow food. When we have a movement of small city farms, in a small and soft manner, we are combating these devils. And also when we propagate clean food, we are going towards Shanti Bhog, jo Krishna Yadav, ye cheez bola jate the. We youngsters are trying to build that movement. Gluten-free jab kaha jata hai, Indian Sharbati wheat, Indian Nathu wheat, Indian Kathia wheat, all these types of wheat are gluten-free. The American wheat has gluten, high levels of toxicity and elasticity. They wanted to patent our seed. are these types of wheat. You know, we did so many petitions, some 14 court orders, and then we were able to safeguard our wheat. Dr. Vandana Shiva is the face of the organic food movement. She's saved our neem and basmati. So you are a global leader, and people look up to you, and whatever you say becomes, a statement or something to reckon with. So please, I mean, I'm not hurt, but I'm just saying the organic food movement, because we present it in a light manner with social media, it's not a passing fashion. It's something very serious, which we are trying to, make it look light, so that more people take to it.
No, I think you misunderstand us.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know, I speak for myself. The intention is not to run down the organic movement. I'm very
No, but calling it a fad and passing fashion is running it down.
No. But I'm afraid I will stand by that comment. I think for past 10 years, and I put my money where my mouth is. I borrowed money to invest in 150 nannies in hills to go for organic farming, which I was sharing with you. And this remains a fad for 10 years. It has not become a movement. And Vandana Shiva has been in business, if I recall correctly, for past 25 to 30 years. She has got the Green Nobel, and I greatly respect her. But except controlled conditions sanctuary farming and Navdanya shops and annual functions at ICL Foods, I have not seen the movement grow. And I have worked with people like Jardari and biodiversity. And my much maligned son finished his PhD in species and biodiversity. And I think we are more or less committed than you. But I regretfully have to admit, I wish you better luck. And you've been in business for 3 years, 4 years now, I think, since you retired from India. I don't know whether you can measure your growth of the movement in concrete terms. And whatever doesn't grow is not a movement for me. So the idea is not to denigrate either what you are doing or what Vandana is doing, but or what Sunita is doing. But let's see that when did Anil Agrawal start this after he resigned from Indian Express? Some of our memories go back 40 years. When he was still working, he had fresh out of IIT and had joined National Railway with Chalpati Rao first. The year was 1970-71, and he worked from F block in Greater Kailash. So unfortunately, the problems of senility of people like me is there are memories run back 40-50 years. And this, what the lady rightly called jargon, has been in existence for so many years. And that's why I began with my childhood in IDRI, which was run by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. It was under the Food and Agriculture Ministry. And I have an intimate relationship with food business at the moment. I shall not be declaring all my conflict of interest today. But the point is that the idea is not to denigrate, but the idea is to realistically realize that we have heard this before. There is a strong sense of demand.
So when demand will go on, only then.
Fair enough. So now we are back again into the market supply demand.
But
So
we can't ignore it. Sustainability and
I'm sorry. Then there would be a beautiful global chain producing organic food globally and giving me gluten-free stuff comfortably, which a small city farmer with a soft earth will not be able to produce.
You see, just carry forward what you see. There is absolutely, I don't think he wants to do it, and I don't want to do it certainly, to run down the people who are absolutely committed to the organic food movement. There's a very dear friend of mine, my batchmate from JNU, who gave up whatever she was doing, and her husband, who was doing a fairly senior corporate work. They gave up all that, Jayashri Joshi and Ganesh Ishwar, and for 20 years they have been running. Yeah. They have been asking for a small loan to expand their network. They are acquiring organically produced food and they are selling it. Greens, grains, pulses, all kinds of things. All banks are telling them that you expand, we'll give you 500 crores. They want 2 crores. Nobody is interested in giving them 2 crores. Everybody wants to convert them into corporates. The moment that happens, this will go out of, and still it will be beyond the reach of the people. It has to grow and become, it has to compete in terms of prices with the non-organic stuff in the market till that happens. And that's a very, very hard battle, because all our major industrial houses are buying tens of thousands of acres in Africa. And that is what is going to happen in the next 5 years, 10 years. All genetically modified crops are going to be cultivated there, and there will be no agriculture happening in this country. Systematically, the most fertile piece of land in this country is being taken over by these fake business management institutes. Drive out from Delhi in any direction.
Education.
This is the most fertile land in the world. What is happening to it? These institutes are not coming up in sterile land or on desert land. They are happening here. And this tens of thousands of acres that is being lost here is being procured in Africa, because they will produce there all genetically modified crops, because there are no controls there. And they will be dumped here because we will have no option. So that is what we are against.
Speaking of Dublin, they buy their raisins and oils from me, so I know them very well. I know what they're all about, what they've given up and what they're.
The last question.
Hello, I just got a small query. Would it be now a time for us to have differentiate between edible food and proper food? Because what you say about genetic modified food and fast food, those things are edible, but are they sustainable both for the body and for society? I won't use the word healthy.
You see, as far as I know, the whole genetically, as far as I know, the genetically modified food, there has not been enough research on any one. I'll just give you one example. There is a vegetable which is absolutely Indian. The Sanskrit name is batingan, which got corrupted into bangan, brinjal. The bangan traveled from here to Central Asia, became badingan, traveled to Arabia to become al-badinjan, transformed into aubergine in France, and brinjal in England. And it has similar names in Spanish and Portuguese and Italian, which are derivatives from batingan. Then it crossed the Atlantic. During this journey, a white variety was developed. That white variety reached North America. They began calling it eggplant. The eggplant came back. From what I have been told, Chinese don't eat it, that variety of brinjal, because it looks like an egg. Americans have developed BT brinjal, and they are telling us to cultivate it. In India, we produce 500 varieties of brinjal, 500. But we are being told to produce BT brinjal here because it is not infested by that specific caterpillar. And why it is not injected by that caterpillar is because in that vegetable, they have spliced a toxicity which is not vegetable life but animal life. That has been spliced into the DNA of the brinjal. So it kills the eggs of that. Now that toxicity is part of the DNA of brinjal. There is no test of what this small minuscule toxicity would do to human being over the next 20 generations. There is no study. And all genetically modified vegetables or seeds and all that suffer from this major. So I don't know whether there is need to even experiment with them, because till these tests have been done and the MNCs are not interested in getting these tests done. BT cotton has already led to so many thousands of suicides. This is all genetically modified. So it is a very, very dangerous territory. And but the genetically modified vegetables and grains give you phenomenal output. So eventually it is the fight against the MNCs and their marketing machine. And the people of the third world who want to survive on food which has not been genetically modified. So it is not a question of sustainability.
So that was, is there any other plan?
Pushpesh, you want to say something in conclusion?
No, Sohail, you want to? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Many thanks for engaging all of us in this question. This was fascinating, the connections that you made today, and thank you both of us. And thank you for the engagement and enthusiasm and the great questions that you all asked. And we hope that the perspectives that they share will influence a lot of people in the field, and we have to find ways to, make this a community thing. More people share this vision, etc. On the 15th, we have a lecture by Kapila Vasyani, the second last lecture in this series on governance, and she's looking at art administration. She's been an art administrator, decades of experience in this field, and has founded institutions, has been a very rigorous academic. We hope you will join us for that lecture on the 15th at the India International Center, 6:30 p.m. Thank you very much. Thank you.